Student Ministry Conversations podcast. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now here's your host for this week, Micah Marshall.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening, we want to welcome you and invite you over to our website, studentministryconversation.org. My name is Micah Marshall, one of the co-hosts here on this beautiful podcast that we have where we talk to youth pastors from all over the place. Our goal is that you are inspired, encouraged. The things that you hear will help equip you to be a better youth pastor. It will help also equip the church that you're serving or the community that you're serving. And absolutely super excited. Today we are sitting down with McKenna Tira. And McKenna has been in youth ministry for a little bit, but today we're going to talk about something a little bit different than we normally talk about. We're going to be talking about transitioning from one youth ministry to the other youth ministry. Because a lot of times what we talk about is transitioning from the youth ministry, youth pastor spot to senior pastor, family life pastor, whatever it might be. But there definitely comes some times where transitioning from one youth ministry to the next can be challenging, definitely if you're dealing with some cultural things. And so I want to say, McKenna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course.
Yes. So I've known McKenna for a minute. I've known her for a minute, know her pretty well. McKenna is a rock star. But so McKenna, give us a little bit about your background. Why youth ministry? First of all, why are you in youth ministry? And then second of all, give us kind of the history of where you started to where you are today. And then I got some questions for you.
Okay, cool. So a little background on me. I went to a ministry school in New Jersey. Thought I was going to go into kids ministry, but got into that a little bit and knew I wanted knew that wasn't quite where I wanted to be, wanted some deeper conversations with teenagers and things. And so I made the switch over, but I loved my time in ministry school. And I made that transition to a different youth group 2 times. So I kind of started leading a youth group in 2019, and then switched to a youth group 2 times in New Jersey before landing where I am right now in Pennsylvania. And so, yeah, I love youth ministry. I love, being able to connect with teens on a relational and spiritual level, being able to give them something that I think I missed out on when I was a teenager, which is like really understanding what it is to follow Jesus.
That's good. That's good. So what I really want to get into this afternoon with you is the transitioning from one youth ministry to the next to where you're currently at. Let me ask this: culturally, how you grew up, where you grew up, to your first landing of your first youth ministry. Culturally, how did that impact you? How did that affect you? Was it something where it was kind of like the same hometown you grew up in is the same type of kids you're going to be ministering to? Or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, each group that I was at, there was a completely different group of teens. And I think that's really what you're going to encounter no matter where you're at. Every group is different. And so, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a challenge, starting somewhere new. You have to learn the culture of the area and the teens themselves because they, act and live differently than, another group. So, yeah, I mean, it takes a learning curve to know, get to know people. That's really important.
Yeah, well, knowing who you're ministering to and how you're ministering to, because I think what happens is a lot of times we'll take our background and what we do and who we are and how we grew up and just expect that everybody's like that. Now,
Yeah.
let's just kind of call the elephant out in the room. New Jersey is a lot different than Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Definitely where you're located at in Pennsylvania. Would you say culturally, with the diverse cultures and the ethnic background of the type of church you were at, the type of students you're at, can you talk a little bit about that and how that impacted you moving forward?
Yeah, I think the last youth ministry I was at before coming back to Pennsylvania, that church was a very different experience. I interned there for just a short period of time, but they were a heavily Filipino church.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was quite a culture shock because the way that their church functions and the teens was very different. And I found it's definitely a challenge to connect with them and kind of learn about, and they did a good job of kind of showing me and telling me about the ways that their culture is different. It definitely takes like humility and wanting to understand and a desire to understand. So yeah, that was definitely an interesting an interesting experience. But New Jersey at a whole, every single area is different, and again, it just takes that learning each individual area and being engulfed in the culture and being willing to not just be in the church but step out of the church as well,
Yeah.
into the community.
Wow. So for you, you did not just hit a like culturally different type of kid, but like even church cult, like ethnicity,
Yeah,
like Filipino, like for those of you that are watching, McKenna is not Filipino. So just to
yeah.
let you know, right?
Yeah,
So if you're
definitely not.
watching, definitely not. So for you stepping into that, you're not only dealing with a change of like the culture of the area and the type of kid, but even the entire church as a whole being very ethnically influenced
Yeah.
by that. How did those initial first few weeks go for you trying to figure things out?
Yeah, it was honestly, it was hard. It was a hard first couple of weeks, just because even the way that some of the adults in the church functions was just very different, and different. Yeah, it was a little bit hard to connect with some of the adults even too, because there was that language barrier as well. I mean, everyone spoke English, but there were some people who spoke very little, and the accents, even like things like that makes it difficult. But what really helped in those first few weeks that I was there was that there was a American-born older woman who was at the church, and she worked there for a long period of time. And so she and her daughter kind of took me under their wings a little bit, and kind of helped me and explained to me the culture and the way that they do certain things might come across a certain way, but it really isn't. So I think that
Yeah.
was really important to have someone willing to explain and sit down and spend time with me to kind of help explain the culture
Yeah.
and different things.
So really the basis is laying that pride aside and just saying, okay, like I got to relearn a couple of things, maybe.
Yeah. Hmm.
I got to relearn the culture and how we are, because all cultures are different. All cultures that you come from, that we have, especially because you don't only have the ethnicity, you have the church culture that plays into it. You got the current culture of the teens that you're with and that what you're doing. And so, I love the fact that you had someone that was willing to say, "Hey, I'm going to take care of you and help you understand,
Yeah.
all of this, and be able to say, okay, like this is why they think this way, this is why they act this way, because here you are, you're a young female youth pastor on fire for the Lord, stepping into a new culture, a new place. Did you ever feel at any point like, God, why am I here? Why am I the one to be at this place at this time?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Definitely, had those thoughts. And even being a female sometimes too is a little bit hard as well, because that um, kind of puts a different spin on things. But also, I feel like a lot of people don't, um, I don't want to say respect maybe, but don't respect a
Mhm.
female as much as a man. And so that was, um, yeah, I mean, that's adds another kind of spin to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know this. I know that, when God calls, it doesn't matter if you're a male or female. If he calls you
Right.
and he has equipped you,
Yeah.
like you will do what you're called to do. You're
Yeah.
equipped to what you're called to do. So like let's play into that a little bit, not to get too controversial with, male and female type leadership, but how do you think that your kids responded to you, who is a outsider to their culture, who is, and is a woman stepping into this position of leadership over them? How did the kids respond to all of this? Were they kind of like, oh, we're not gonna, engage with her, she's, a white female? Or did they like really embrace you? Or did they say, hey, because she's not she's not part of our culture, we're not gonna have anything to do with her? Or did they just say, hey, here's someone that loves us, like let's hang out? Walk me through the process of that with the kids.
Yeah, I mean, so that church actually didn't have a youth ministry before I came.
Okay.
So everything was brand new to them. I don't, to my knowledge, I don't think that they really cared as much, who it
Mm,
was that, was coming in and trying to start the youth group up for them. Yeah, so I'd like from the kids, I didn't feel any pushback at all. I think sometimes with those things, it's more of like a internal negative thoughts that, someone might have about, their position there or what other people might think.
mm.
Sometimes I think it's more of an internal thing. It definitely what is for me, more of an internal thing than a pushback from other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, anyone that's been in church culture a while knows that there are certain taboos within the Christian culture where, some people have strong opinions about certain things and about who should lead and who shouldn't, if a female should, if a male should, all these different things that can be brought up. And, that is oftentimes a contention point for a lot of ministries. But I love what you said on how, it can be an internal thing. Sometimes, I think when we are transitioning from whatever ministry to the next ministry, our biggest competition is not winning the favor of the kids, but mainly in our mind.
hmm
Like
yeah,
trying
for
to
sure.
trying to compete. So, like, let me ask you, when you begin to have that internal struggle, how did you walk through that? What was the process like in being able to overcome those type of things?
Yeah, I mean, even where I'm at right now, I think um, I still dealt with those things. So I don't know if
Mm,
there's like a end all be all, you figured it out. But I think it really comes down to being confident in what God has called you to and the where he's called you and who he's called you to, being confident in that and that it's okay to have weakness and struggles. And that, nobody's going to be perfect. And
mm,
sometimes even acknowledging those weaknesses can be a good thing. And one of the things too is, talking with parents. Sometimes that can be hard
mm.
as a female and someone who doesn't have kids yet, because you don't understand,
I am.
you don't fully understand what it is to be a parent. And sometimes that hindered me, internally. I was like, oh, like I'm afraid to talk to parents because they're gonna think this or they're gonna think that. But even sometimes I've stepped out now lately and even acknowledging, hey, like I don't know, like just saying it, to them straight up, I don't know what it's like to be a parent exactly, but this is what I do know. It's kind of approaching it like that.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to that old church saying about God calling. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call, and
Yeah.
all of that. And I think that's super important for any type of transition. So you made really three transitions in the last several years, correct? Like in youth ministry, would you
Yeah.
say?
hmm
Yeah. So let's talk about the next transitional phase that you had made. So you were in Jersey for how long?
Let me think about that. It was in college. College, I was there for 2 or 3 years. Ministry, maybe two or
Yeah.
three, 2.5, something like
Yeah.
that.
So then you transition. And for those of you who just need a little background in this, McKenna transitioned back to Pennsylvania, correct? Um,
Mhm.
and some psycho weird youth pastor, crazy guy from Pennsylvania and Altoona area decided to hire you, and bring you on staff. What was that like in the transition of leaving that place that you were and transitioning into that brand new place, where you have some familiarity, you have some understanding? Because for you, it was really going back home,
Yeah.
to an area that you grew up in and serving in youth ministry. So walk me through that process from the day that I called you and was like, hey,
Yeah.
we want you to be on staff with Refuge Youth Network and Journey Church, because McKenna does work with us here at Refuge, but she's an absolute rock star in what she does. But I want you to explain that process of that initial conversation, what that looked like, and even like if you could explain, McKenna, what spiritually in your heart begins to change when you feel like a transition is coming.
Yeah. I mean, those last few months in New Jersey were personally kind of a hard season. And so it was a hard season, but in that season, I felt like God was kind of speaking and tugging at my heart that there was something different. There was something new that was going to come. And I didn't get the call yet, or I didn't know anything about, any openings in Pennsylvania at all. I just felt that there's something new. And, sometimes it definitely gave me a worried, anxious kind of feel. Just because, like, oh, there's something new, but you don't know what that new is. Like, there's nothing, you don't see anything on the horizon. But definitely, there's just such a peace, though, after I, got the call and there was an opening, such a peace that, God was leading me in a certain direction. And, that feeling that there was something new, a few weeks later or a few months later, was met with, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so transitioning home was hard, but it was really good. New Jersey, I spent a lot of time in New Jersey, and I thought, I was going to be there for a really long time. I thought, I was going to like live out there, for years and years,
Yeah.
with different connections and things I had, but, God had a different plan. And even, right now I'm glad, grateful, that I came back and for God's plan. But it was good. It was really good in coming back, transitioning to a new role where I am very familiar with everyone that I'm, some of the teens and stuff that I'm working with, which is really good, but also had some hard aspects as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just, being around people that knew you as a teenager or as a kid can be kind of hard because, I feel like sometimes people can still view you as a kid or
Mm-hmm.
not understand, the years that I spent in New Jersey and the ways that I've changed.
Yeah.
And so coming back, the friends that I thought I would have, I'm not as close to them as I thought I would be, just
Mm-hmm.
because, time changes things and stuff like that. But there's also, good things with it as well, because some of the teenagers that are in my youth ministry right now, I knew them when like they were kids, not well, but knew of them when they were kids. And so
Mm-hmm.
now them being a teenager in a youth ministry is just, it's really cool. And so as the months and almost coming up on 2 years, as the time has passed, some of these things of, feeling like people, still view me as a kid, they have definitely diminished
Mm-hmm.
as time goes on and as, we continue to do youth ministry and things. So,
Yeah. So let me just ask you this: if you had a young girl who comes to you, says, "Hey, I'm wanting to be in youth ministry. I'm looking for a transition into something that I'm not exactly familiar with, going somewhere I'm not," or you're even just a young youth pastor who said, like, "Listen, I grew up in this type of culture, this type of way, and I feel like God is pulling me over here to transition into like more of like this type of ministry serving." I mean, whether it's a small town to a big city or a big city to a small town, what advice would you give to them that you look back and you're like, man, I wish somebody would have really kind of given me this advice?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I go back to when I was at that Filipino church in New Jersey, having somebody to sit down and build a relationship with, that maybe has been in ministry or does know the culture really well, but finding someone that can really have that relationship with you to explain things, to show you around or to explain the culture to you. I think relationships are really important. Just really getting to know the people you work with, or parents, or the pastors at that church. I think getting to know, people is really important. So I think relationships are the biggest thing, but also just spiritually making sure that you are firm in what God has called you to do, that you keep your eyes fixed on that, because that really is your anchor.
Yeah. So really being able just to have that relationship with people that are your support system, but more importantly, knowing that you're called,
Yeah.
and knowing that you're meant to do this. And I think that's super important because kind of going back to your transition. So, what type of kids did you then from that culture to this culture transition to, and what did that look like? do you think that there are things that we have to like really pivot and shift and move because of, kids are kids regardless of where they're at. Teens are teens regardless, but there are different flavors that we sometimes.
Yeah.
So what did that look like going from that heavy Filipino culture back to Pennsylvania to, to really working with those kids that you work with now?
Yeah, there was a little bit of a shift, but really there are more similarities than differences. I think the biggest differences are just the way of life. New Jersey's super busy and on the go, and so it's a little bit a slower pace of life here, and there's different interests in the teens, and stuff like that. But a lot of the things, stay the same, which are like the relationships, getting to know the students.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, because transitioning is important, because the fact is we all transition, right? Like we are all going to
yeah,
make transitions. There are some people that are lifers in youth ministry, but most people are going to transition really from one youth ministry to the next, and so forth and so on. I made a transition in youth ministry, years ago. And I landed in a spot that I really, just feel like I'm called to, and I feel like God has for me to be in. And so it was one of those things that it was like, I think there's a piece in when you land where you're supposed to be, that God gives. I think that there's confirmation of like, I can't really be moved from here, because I know this is what God has for me. And you can
yeah,
kind of rest in that call of saying, okay, God, this is what you've called me to do. This is where you called me to be. And I think that's huge. And as you progressively settle in for where you're at, and build a relationship with those kids, then you build that, security of your call, build relationships with the people and all those things. So what are some of the things that you do in your personal life, privately, that have helped secure you through transitions? Because I know you have some good habits, you have some good things that you do on a regular basis. How do good habits and disciplined habits in our personal life help us with that mental part of transitioning?
yeah. I think having something as things are changing, transition, a lot of things change, but having things that are going to stay the same and are
Hmm.
stable are really important. Um, so yeah, for me, I mean, I do a lot of things in my, a lot of habits and stuff in my personal life, that I think really, kind of helps stabilize in transition. I think having a hobby or something that you enjoy doing, is really important, so that your life is not always constantly revolved around ministry. It's good to have something to do outside of ministry, that you genuinely enjoy doing, and so there's that. I have a few of those that I like to do, and then, yeah, just making sure that you're spending time with God, I think, is the biggest thing too, to help kind of stabilize you in the season. Keeping that relationship with God, whatever that looks for each person, consistent.
Yeah, and I think that's super important to be able to do. I think that that's something that we are called to, called to. I really believe that.
Yeah,
I think that habits are important. I think that I'm a very habitual person in what I like to do and how I am, and things of that nature. And so I really enjoy being able to see people transition well. I think that's important. I think being able to know how people transition and the way people transition is a good thing. And so, yeah, but I appreciate you being on with us, McKenna. Thank you so much,
yeah, it's fun.
for being a part of this. McKenna, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I would say, Instagram _ McKenna _ Lee, Leigh. It's a little bit of different spelling.
All right, awesome. So, hey, listen, if you're a viewer, a listener, and you just enjoyed this conversation that we had with Pastor McKenna from Refuge Youth Network, if you enjoyed that, make sure that you hit her up, follow her up. If you have anything that you would like to ask her, please reach out to her. We'll have her information available in the bio and in our description of this. But again, thank you for tuning in to Student Ministry Conversations. We love that you're a part of this. We love that you are listening and tuning in. We really believe that God is going to do some amazing things through all of you. Again, thank you, Pastor McKenna, for joining us, and we will see you all later.